Are you a good person? You know, um, it's weird. I feel like being asked that question, it's really awkward, right? Not only because you don't want to be the one that judges yourself and sound self-righteous, right? When other people might disagree and think differently, right? But also because it's a hard question, right? What makes someone a good person? I mean, that's right? That's different than morality, right? Morality being what's right and wrong, okay? I mean, that brings tons of questions in. I'm gonna make a video soon on that. But I think being a good person is different. You don't need to define morality for that, right? Because whatever that person has morality defined as really is what's gonna make it, right? And there's a difference between being a good person in your eyes and in others' eyes. Because morality, no matter what you define it as, there's everyone has different definitions, right? Based on religion, culture, all these things, okay? So, can you be a universally good person, right? Is that possible? Because some people, I mean, have helped tons of people, right? You know, Gandhi, I'm not super well versed on very prominent good people, but no one's ever described someone like that as a good person, right? You can say they did great things, they helped all these people, right? So on. But no one really says good person because it's awkward, it makes a statement that's much more subjective, right? Well, it's not more subjective. I don't know, it's awkward. It's more confrontive. I don't know, right? Um, but I think a common theme about people that are good people is that they help people. So if you help people, does that make you a good person? And how good of a person can you be, right? What if everything you do is for selfish reasons? What if um, the only reason you help this lady across the road carry her groceries is because you will feel better about yourself when you do it. You can tell yourself all these things, but that's just someone could just say, well, that's part of the reason because you have to believe that you're doing it for another reason, which is otherwise you would just feel bad and feel selfish, right? So how do you know? You know, um, even if someone dies, right? It could be because um, they want to be remembered well, right? They want to know that they died helping this person, because death is a very scary thing. Um, and not many people want to die, but maybe in those last moments, you kind of subconsciously think, um, well, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna go out a good way, right? And that's a really sad reality. I feel like a lot of the things on this channel, the alternatives are always so sad, right? But those are also the unpopular opinions, which seems to be a common theme. That the things that are sad and we don't like are what we tend to not believe, which that that's not a good sign, right? Because that makes it sound that it's just biased and we just kind of gaslight ourselves into believing whatever because it makes us feel good. So, but what makes those bad, right? What makes some like lying, for example, what makes that bad? I feel like that's a fairly universal thing, right? Um, and there's different degree. There's lying to help someone, right? But when does that cost outweigh it, right? And I'm starting to get a little bit pretty off topic. Um, I'm starting to talk a lot more about morality. It's very closely intertwined, but I don't think it's necessary, right? So what makes someone a good person? We know that there's so many factors. There's so many things that change this, right? And Are you a good person based on your belief of yourself being a good person or others? Because are biased. Yours is biased. There's nothing objective, right? There's no objective belief in you being a good person. Can you be a good person, right? I mean, the Bible says that everyone sins. So is anyone a good person? Do you have to be pure to be a good person? Or is it the actions that you do that are pure, right? You don't have to be, maybe you don't yourself have to be pure, but the actions that you have need to be pure. And I think those are different, right? And your actions are very important to you as a person, right? I think those are part of your character, but you can be a hateful person, a terrible person, right? But your actions are good, right? So is it the consequence? And these are all questions that I'm leaving a lot of questions unanswered. I'm just gonna answer those in the next video, which will be on morality. That'll probably be the longest one. Um, but I don't know, I think being a good person is just weird because I think it has to rely on what you think, right? And you can bend things to what you think, right? But say, like what everyone else says, right? That takes the whole idea of individualism away, right? If everyone else tells you what and who you are, then there's really no you. You are just part of the mob. Wait, I'm about to flip reset. Oh. Um, but in the same way, um, are we a fair judge? I mean, I know that if I had the choice between being remembered as this amazing person that helped people and was nice and being this really cold, dark person, I'd want to be the nice one, right? The good one. What makes it good? I don't know, right? Is being a good person a good thing? Who's to say that being a good person is good, right? That it doesn't really make sense saying it out loud. But what I mean by that is there's so many different opinions of you, right? And your opinion changes based off those opinions. So is it really even possible to say that you your opinion of yourself being a good person is what can make you a good or bad person, right? Instead of society? Because their opinions, I guarantee you, if everybody you know starts telling you you are a bad person when you truly believe that you are a good person, you're gonna start doubting a lot, right? And if you don't doubt like that, then it's, I mean, you'll probably be admitted somewhere as a psychopath or something. So who's to say that being a good person is even possible? Because we can't say it's only by us, and we can't say it's by society, because society is the reason we say it has to be us, but society pollutes us, and there's nothing, or influences us. I don't want to say pollutes, but society is a weird thing, right? And you can't escape that. You need society, right? Where would you be without society? You'd have nothing to base what's good or bad off of, right? Um, Unless you think of what's good or bad. But that's going to be hard with no other people because I think that you need something living to really say if it's right or wrong. So it's just a paradox being a good or a bad person. It's impossible to answer. It's impossible to know. Um, and I'm not really sure. There's all kinds of theories. Like there's the philo- philosophic equation. I think it's by Immanuel Kant. Deontology, pretty much. There's some parts to it. I don't totally remember it. I'm not gonna look it up because one take as per usual. Um, but it pretty much goes like it has to be a universal law. Like he says lying is wrong in any case. He pretty much forgets about the consequence of something. And you can search it up. I can't give an accurate definition. I don't want to spread misinformation. But I think that's the best thing we've got. But it's still there's so many things that are just that don't make sense, right? I don't really know what else to say. I feel like it's impossible to answer a question like this. Um, I think I am gonna post this video, but I'll probably post another one in the future. Um, because I think first we need to talk more about. No, I'm not gonna post this actually. I don't know what I'm talking about. Does not being a good person mean you're a bad person? Can you be a neutral person? Can you go from being a good person to a bad person? If we could even figure out what that means. Well, I think a good person is based off the Bible. You know, I don't think that morality and all this can be really concretely talked about without an authority to tell you, right? And that I already said why that authority can't be humans because it just doesn't make sense. You need something pure, which would be a God, which would be Jesus. You need something to base it off of. You need someone to tell you what's right and what's wrong. You know, and there's a lot of issues with that, you know? Like there's a lot of evidence that like or not evidence, sorry, but strong inferences that you can look at based off like stuff in people that we pretty much get our morals and all this from others, right? Um, for example, if you live in America, like a wealthy country, um, you'd probably say cannibalism is wrong. But there's a tribe, or there's an indigenous peoples in, I think it's Antarctica, or it might be the North Pole. I'm not totally sure. But it's a very desolate, cold zone with almost no like natural stuff, right? And they eat, I want to say it's half their children and their old people. And they don't see it as wrong, right? If they saw it as morally conflicting as we would have stopped, right? But they don't because they don't see anything wrong with it. It's part of their way of life. They would all be dead. They could not survive without that extra food because there's just close to nothing. You know, and there's a lot of other things like people have said like, well, they could try to find a different solution, you know, but they didn't. And that's the situation they're in. But they don't see anything wrong with it. We would say, "Oh my goodness, you're terrible." But when you see the consequences or the circumstances, right? It's the same as if you have a mother who is broke and out of a job and she has two kids, they're starving to death, and she steals from a family that has billions of dollars, right? And they eventually arrest her, right? And they're like, that was wrong, and they're angry. But then they realize that her kids were gonna die, right? They ask, is that still wrong? I mean, eh, um, it's all that was to to say. Uh, it's pretty much impossible to talk about morality, in a like sense where you're not gonna have every single point argued without an authority. You need some authority. I don't know where that comes from, right? But I think it comes from God. I don't know it does, but I believe it does. I have faith that it does, right? Um, and essentially, you just have to believe with God, because God is perfect. He can't sin. He's perfect, right? And um, there's a lot of things like, oh, well, if he can't sin, he can't do everything. Meaning he's not a God. It's like, it, I while those answer questions are weird, and I don't really have an answer. It's also partly because I don't really think about them. Um, I haven't really taken time to think about it because I think they just don't matter. I think they're useless questions. There's some questions in philosophy that people are like in arguments that people ask, and it's like, yeah, you're making a point, but it's just useless. You're not gonna solve anything by answering that, right? So I don't really think about that, right? Let me know if you want me to. Oh well, I'm not. I don't imagine it'll be hard to come up with something, but um, yeah, being a good person has to be defined by God. I don't see any other way that makes sense, right? Other than society, but that doesn't make sense either, right? It can't be you, okay? You can't be the authority. Like, look where the world is. Think of where the world would be, because people would just be like, oh well, you get places like Nazi Germany, right? Or actually, you know, this happens a lot, but I'm kind of rethinking what I'm saying, right? Because I feel like saying you decide whether you're a good person or society does is so closely intertwined, right? Because I said Nazi Germany because they ignored society, right? And said I'm right, and then they did these terrible things, you know. But at the same time, society is what shaped that. So it's a really weird, confusing thing. But the point is that it doesn't make sense, right? I got lost in my own words talking about it, right? Um, you need an authority. I keep repeating it, right? Because I don't know what else much to say about that. You need an authority. You need someone to tell you whether this is right and wrong. Otherwise, you get stuck in this loop of I don't know, right? And I feel like the questions that rise when you say, "Well, how does this authority know?" and stuff are separate questions. They're not about whether you're a good person or not. They're about existence and capabilities and stuff. But there's also questions like, does believing in God make you a good person? Does following the commandments make you a good person? And I think yes, if you follow the commandments perfectly, you're a good person. But what if you try to and you fail and you can't do it? Which is every single person except for Jesus. Um, I think that trying to be a good person isn't far off from being a good person. I think that there's a lot of argument about whether consequence or whether intention is what makes something a good or bad moral action, right? But I've never understood like the thing about consequence being what it does, because that takes personal, that's just utilitarianism, which takes away the personal aspects of a decision. And if something is a personal, it can't be moral, right? It's like if I flip a coin, I'll kill this guy, right? There can be whatever context you want, right? Harvey Dent, pretty much. I'm talking about Harvey Dent from Batman: The Dark Knight. But yeah, it's not personal. There's no morality in that. The consequence you can say, oh, this is bad, this is right, whatever. But it's not a moral decision, right? So how can the action be moral? So that's a whole different thing. But basically, I'm saying that if you even like not thinking about consequence, something has to be personal for it to be moral, right? Meaning, I think you personally trying to do these commandments is a good, righteous, moral decision. And you don't always get them right. And that's different. I don't really know. I don't really want to discuss in this video because it's already getting pretty long. But yeah. I That's what I think about being a good person or not. And there's a lot of other small things. I don't really know. I'm honestly right now I'm thinking about the new season of Rocket League tomorrow. Can't wait. Am I a bad person for that? Am I a bad person because rather than thinking about the children starving in third world countries or the young boys, kids younger than me, fighting in wars that die, terrible deaths, right? And I'm not doing everything I can to help them. Am I a bad person? It's such a weird concept. It's an awkward concept. It makes us our own judge. And we hate being that because we weren't designed to be our own judge. We were designed to have someone else judge us. That's God. We can't judge each other. We know. I mean, think of the um, justice system, the U.S. justice system. That's a joke, right? It's we need God to judge us. He tells us if we're a good or bad person. Um, but that's more so like more. I don't think God's gonna ever like think you're a bad person or you're a good person. That's just different. It's really weird and it's hard to articulate, but yeah, that's all I got. If you have any questions about anything, any video ideas, whatever, let me know in the Discord. It'll be in the description.